Hi, everyone. Welcome to Always Be Reading. I'm Chantel, your host, and tonight is a special episode, a Books with Friends episode, where we are talking about a book that is a little different for this channel. We're discussing a book called No One Taught Me How to Be a Man, What a Trans Man's Experience Reveals About Masculinity by Shannon Kearns, who's a writer, ordained minister, and a transgender man whose work often explores the intersection of faith, identity, and belonging. This book was published in 2025 and has been received as both deeply personal and quietly provocative. Readers have praised its vulnerability and its willingness to examine masculinity with compassion rather than with condemnation, while others have noted that it asks difficult questions without offering easy solutions. In many ways, even the reception of the book mirrors the subject itself. Conversations about masculinity tend to be complicated, emotional, and unfinished. Kearns writes from a very unique perspective that is relatively rare. He was raised in a conservative Christian environment, first experienced the world as being a woman, then a lesbian, and later came out and transitioned to living a life fully as a man. And because of that journey, he writes about masculinity not as something that's invisible, but something that's learned consciously, something observed from both inside and outside all at once. And yet, the more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a book about men. It was a book about power, formation, faith, and the stories cultures tells about who gets to lead and who gets to follow. Reading this as a Black woman, I found myself thinking less about masculinity in general and more about white masculinity in particular, especially the version shaped within the white evangelical culture. This book helped me name patterns that feel deeply connected to the political and cultural moment we are now living through. Not simply disagreements about policy, but deeper questions about identity, belonging, and what happens when roles people are taught no longer seem stable. Tonight, I'm joined by my friend, Amy Elliott, who virtually put this book in my hand. What feels important to me is not having a conversation about anyone in particular, but thinking together across experience. As a Black woman and a white woman sitting together with this text, we bring different histories, different proximities to the cultures the author describes, and different ways of recognizing what is happening on the page. And that feels especially fitting for this book because one of Kearns' central ideas is that masculinity is not something formed in isolation. It is built in community, shaped by what we see reflected back to us by others. So tonight, it's not about arriving at answers. It is about thinking carefully, listening honestly, and allowing a book to help us understand the moment that we are living in a little more clearly. So, Amy, welcome to the show. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so excited.
Yes. And thank you again for suggesting that we read this book together. I did not know what to expect, but I was like, okay, I will go on this journey.
I love it.
I will go on this journey. And as I was sitting, just trying to get my thoughts together for our conversation tonight, I think the question that kept pressing me that I wanted to ask you was about your experience, like almost inside your body as you were reading it.
Yeah.
Like what was happening to you? Because things were happening to me, and I wondered like if things were happening to you too. So I think I'd like to start our conversation there.
That's a great place to start because that was one of the things I grappled with quite a bit was the visceral response as I was reading it. So this book is for men. So
Yes.
we're not exactly the target audience,
We
right?
are not.
No. But that's also one of the reasons I wanted to read it. So I wanted to learn more about how men talk about being men with each other, right? And what guidance that there is. But as I was reading it, I'm so used to reading books and putting myself in the book
Yes.
and having it be a message to me that it's spoken to me just based off of different books that I read, or being able to have that presence where you're looking down on something. So with this at moments, it made me really angry. I wrestled with a lot of anger, and not because I didn't know that there is hatred toward women, that there is objectification of women, sexualization of women. I know that all exists. I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to me. We hear it, but having it talked about so honestly as just, this is it. This is how the current environment is. Women are not safe. We don't enjoy, like, women don't enjoy the same kind of safety. And having that told to me, even though I knew it, it made me angry because it shouldn't be that way. And then I had moments too where I also felt like men have similar struggles to women as far as identity and being put in a box and being labeled. And so I felt empathy in those moments. And it was a tangle of emotions. And I'm still trying to untangle it. I'm going to have to read it again, and probably a third time. But I'm excited about that because I have learned a lot, but I'm just not entirely sure what I've learned.
I think that's such a great description. I think you captured so much of what I was feeling. It was interesting because I was confronted with a lot of my bias as I was stepping into this book in loud ways that really was like, wow, my bias of, well, like, what can this person really, how can they talk about masculinity? They're not born male.
Yes.
So, and that was a quiet judgment that was in my brain. And I had to almost like actively turn that off. And I think the author helped me do that in the introduction or in the forward, because he spoke to that, which I appreciated, but it was there. And so right off the top, I think I was like, wow, Chantel, like, look, checking my own biases.
Yeah.
And then I made assumptions about what the book would be about. Like, I did. And as I was reading, I was like, wait a second. I was like, oh, okay. And I too felt a range of, I like how you said, tangled emotions. I like how you said that you were angry. I was shocked at a certain point, and just shocked at, and we'll talk about that. So I had shock, and also I'm reading it from outside of a different culture. So I'm like, is this like for real? So part of me is, I'm bewildered. I'm like, is this for real? Because I can't relate to some of it, which I find interesting. I also was deeply empathetic, like deeply compassion. I think I had more awareness of how women are historically, and even into the present, how women are limited, right, in different ways. But I didn't have as much of a view in how men are limited,
Right.
So I found that to be really eye-opening, and I was reading certain passages to my husband as I was like going through this. And he was like, yeah, like agreeing, to a lot of the stuff that I was reading. And I think I gosh, I think another emotion that I felt was appreciative. I was very appreciative to have been given this assignment almost to read this book that probably I never would have even known about, or I would not have picked it up, to read. And so again, like, thank you.
I'm glad I
Yes.
could read it with you, because I think
Yes.
reading it, you mentioned in the opening about isolation and
Yes.
the importance of friendship, and being able to talk about these sort of things help us learn and really have it ingrained within our, well, undo those biases. Even when you
Undo
talk
those
about it, it
biases.
sticks longer.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
um yeah,
I want
so
to go to the
I'm
parts.
excited.
Yeah, I want to go to some of the parts that angered you. I want to sit in like
Mm.
that emotion. And then we can journey towards empathy and appreciation maybe through our conversation. Maybe we'll journey that way.
Because
But
sometimes they were happening within seconds of each other.
right, right.
Yeah.
But was there like what was the moment or moments in the book where you experienced that visceral reaction?
Yeah. So I have it here. I wrote all
Yeah,
over it as I
me
was
too. Me too.
working in it. With it, I think one of the unique perspectives where that helped me anchor to my emotions as I was reading it too is
Mhm.
knowing that he has experienced being raised as a woman.
Yes.
The author, Shannon, being raised as a woman, which is one of the reasons that perspective for me is like being on the outside and then the inside, but not totally on the inside. So
Mhm.
being able to really examine it in a way through a lens that helped anchor me to the discussion like he
Right.
was having. So the anger part, I think, even just in the title of one of the sections, before I even read it, and this is where I was like, oh, what's this going to be about? Was finding safety in our bodies.
Yes. Yes.
It made me angry initially because with everything this book was written in 2025. You mentioned
Yeah.
that. And with
Yep.
everything that's happening and the struggle for women to maintain autonomy over their own bodies and the difficulties with the queer community with having rights taken away. So I was just like, oh, what issues do men have with feeling safe
Safe in
in
their
their
body.
bodies? Because they have the power. You mentioned
Right.
power also.
Yes.
So reading that, even before I tucked into the content of it, I was angry. And I had to put the book down for a minute because I felt like I need to mentally prepare for what I was about to read. And then it surprised me. And this is again where there was a roller coaster
Mhm.
of emotion, but also anger in that. Let me back up a little bit. So, this chapter, how it talks about finding safety in their body is they talk about the need to represent externally to
Mhm.
maintain this definition of masculinity that was defined not by this generation, not even by the last generation. It's been defined. It's such an old definition. It's archaic, but it's finding new ways to carry on. So the anger with that was you have the power to change things. You have the power. So the safety in your body, you want to be safe
Mhm.
in your body. Great. You technically are. They talked about how there isn't that with each other because men are threats to other men. The violence of
Right.
fighting, the infighting, right? The in competition. So that section stirred me up a lot, but then I had
Yeah.
empathy with it and like, oh, someone else is behind you. This box was created
Right.
and we're in it, but you have the power to walk out of it and change things.
Mhm. 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 Yeah. That is it was a very interesting chapter for sure, because I liked how it started, and it was the first section actually that I read to Kyrie about the rules of the bathroom. And it was
Yes.
just like one of these things that eased us in. And and the rules of the bathroom, again, I think what's so clever about this is that unique perspective, because he knows the rules of the female bathroom in the
Mhm.
world. And even though in my sense, in my understanding of his lived experience, even though he is a transgendered man, and has done that and walks around and visibly even looks like that, that formation of what it is to be a woman and walk around in the space is always present,
Yep.
and gives, like you said, such a different perspective. And even in the bathroom, where it's like these rules, and I read these rules to my husband, and he was like, yes, like, don't talk, don't, and I'm like, don't make eye contact, don't stand next to another guy. If there's a urinal, you like skip,
Yeah.
you don't use the one that's next to someone using it, like all of these rules. And I was like, well, what if somebody did that? What if somebody walked into the bathroom and was talking, or just asked a question, or had a conversation, or stood beside you, and he was like, no, like that doesn't happen. Like, no.
Yeah, that part caught me
Why
too.
does it take you all so long to go to the bathroom? What do you do in the bathroom? And I'm like, well, if this is what I can understand, you get in and you get out.
Right.
Right?
We had a very similar conversation. I talked to my partner about it too, and it was the you can't make eye contact. You look down, as you were saying, and I said I go into a bathroom and I walk out with friends, so
Yeah.
I can't imagine not just being polite to somebody,
Right.
even like, or excuse me, or passing somebody a paper towel, like that just
Right.
doesn't happen. And they even talk about the cleanliness of
Yeah.
it, and
Gosh.
I found that to be an interesting symbol in a way
Mhm.
of like
Mhm.
this weird like self-loathing that men have, which has been talked about, right? When in the book he talks about how there are all these definitions about what a man is supposed to be, but the main definition of a man is to not be a woman.
Mhm.
So that blames women again, right? It puts women in the middle of like this anger of men not knowing who they are, and
Mhm.
it's just to be the opposite of what women are. But when you look at the cleanliness of like a bathroom, and that all those rules and structure, but they don't bother to like clean their side of the street, if you
Right.
know what I'm
Right.
saying. Like,
Right.
if there's a certain piece about like hygiene, like not respecting your body
Mhm.
and your space. And what does
Mhm.
that say then about the chaos? And like,
Mhm.
I don't want to call it dirty, but like the unknowing or the lack of structure that they have internally, and that they put up with it. Like they think that's manly.
That's manly, or that's okay, or that, I wonder too, like, how that connected this part in the cleanliness, because I hear Kyrie has horror stories of the hygiene in the male bathrooms, like, and it's just really bad stories, especially like on his job, like just what happens in there, and just the conditions. And I wonder if there's a chapter that I felt that was really interesting, which was about kind of like the who is responsible, like
Mm,
that men are they're not kind of they have these things that they do and that they don't do, and that they're not observant, they don't look around, they don't notice, they don't do certain things. And so if cleaning up behind yourself isn't something that is within the expectation. Um, it
The
kind of like
entitlement.
and the entitlement, that's what it is. It was the entitlement of it. So not
Yep.
saying that, oh, here it is. I'm like, where is it? It was like, I'm on page 70. Men have been trained not to see. And I thought that was so profound. We've been trained not to know how to do things for ourselves. We've been trained to just let it be and it'll all work itself out. And then this idea of not being trained not to see and how it can show up, like examples of what that looks like in different aspects of its life. So it might be in your household if you were in charge of mowing the lawn on the weekends and your sister was in charge of helping dinner, not seeing what the sister did, you
Yeah.
know, or and we talk about which I find it's always the women that's making the plans for, like, hey, let's get together with this couple that I call our
Right.
social calendar is really held up by women, you know, putting those calendars together. And men don't see that. They just you know, Christmas and organizing family things, like all of these things, it's just not seeing. And there's this one aspect of like they kind of show up to these spaces, but not necessarily having a responsibility in the same way. And it's not
Right.
even something that's like, set down and divvied up the workload either. It's
No.
just something that has it's like an expectation, it's an entitlement of certain things are just kind of set up for me. And I found that really fascinating. And I wonder if a man was sitting in the circle with us, their reaction and response to that, like my question to this is that something that Shannon was able to see so clearly or in that way because of her experience as a woman? If a man, you know, was sitting with us, um a cisgendered man, would they see that, you know, or see it in this
Maybe
in that
not.
way?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think even the discussion, like even when men do see it, it's looked as effeminate to be to
Yeah.
plan things and be social.
Yeah.
And there was a part in the book too to reinforce your point. So it's not only that they're not seeing it, is they've been
Mhm.
taught to not look at it.
Yeah.
They've been taught to be the Marlboro Man, right?
Yeah.
And Clint Eastwood. These men who define masculinity are always alone. They don't talk
Mhm.
to each other. They don't engage in social stuff because that's not manly. So not
Mhm.
only do they not see it, but they're taught that a real man isolates himself.
Right.
You don't need
Right.
other people. Those other
Right.
people need you, but you don't need them, which is
Mhm.
incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your
And
question.
had terrible skin. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I want to find the part that really bothered me.
Yeah, I
I
want to hear this.
truly bothered me, and it's bothered me, um and that is the part where I should have had it tagged, Amy.
I know, that's how I
um
feel. I have a bunch of underlining and notes in the margins, but I didn't tag the
I'm like,
pages.
let me have it tagged, but you're gonna know what I'm talking about. And that is when he was talking about, I'm gonna find it, when he was talking about how the thought process of Christian men
Yes.
and their it's so crazy.
The God ordained
Christian
masculinity
the
chapter.
God ordained masculinity, but how they had to basically they were being kept, their faith was keeping them from raping and murdering.
Yes, I had to put the
What
book down.
I
Uh,
did what is that? What I that is what I would like to I gosh, I'm gonna find it. I it was so troubling um and it's not something that as a Black woman I'm relating to. So this is my example of, is this, but I do have a friend who talks about, and she's white, and she talks about this. We actually had a conversation, and I told her about this passage because it's so troubling. And she was like, no, that makes sense to me. There is such an entitlement and such a rage also that, just this entitlement of, if I want it, I can have it.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe in the mind, they wouldn't consider it rape, right? In that way. But the thought of like ownership of women's body, just being able to dictate, and also the thing of self-control, like
Yeah.
not being able to have self-control. And I also know that I have a window view into evangelical purity culture, and I've been learning about that because culturally that wasn't something that I knew anything about. And it's all of this, it's on the women. The women are the ones that have to police themselves and, do all of these things to themselves because the men are weak. But it's almost like, well, of course the men are weak. They can't control themselves. You
Right.
know, they lack control. But it's not about having an expectation that men should control themselves. It's the burden is on the female, to do that. And so it's almost like this sense of like, yes, if I'm not doing this, and if I don't believe in this faith, then my natural self is to just be a man that is just out of control like that. Is that
Right.
did that
Yes. I wrote yikes in the margin.
What page is that on? Did you find it?
The one, I mean, I think it's on a few pages. I'm looking at
Okay.
page 184 right now,
Uh-huh.
where they talk about in church sermons in
Yeah.
Christianity, men are continually given conflicting information. Men are responsible for being pure and protecting the purity of their wives, but are also told that without God's help, they are at risk of being driven mad by their sexual urges. The number of
Yes.
sermons I heard in high school from men saying that without God, they would be sex-crazed rapists is more than I can count. That's where I wrote yikes.
Yes.
This idea that a strong belief in God is the only thing keeping men from ravaging everyone around them makes men question their every thought and emotion. And it goes on into deeper water.
Exactly. And that ties with what I read on 18. And I had a like, what? With where it says, I heard from men growing up in my church, they were fond of saying that it was only their faith in Jesus that kept them from being rapists and monsters.
Yes.
These statements were meant to show how strong their faith was. Like they were actually saying this as a way of like almost testimony. And
Yeah.
it's like, that is, as a Black woman, I do not relate to this. Like, this is part of it where it's like, yes, a window into masculinity and a window maybe into whiteness that I experience.
Yeah. Well, that's where we get back to the power, right? So where it's about white masculinity is about dominating everyone, and everyone else is a toy to play with sexually first, because that's like a primal need in their mind that is also God ordained in their mind. So what's interesting is that I finished this book on Sunday, and I had church that day, and in the church that I go to does a rise and shine where you can talk, and it was about womanist theory in the Bible, and where are the women, and why is there not better representation, healthy representation for women in the church and just like how it's structured. So it was interesting because one of the sections that we had to read was the story of Hagar. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a devastating story about rape and slavery and ownership. And it's about women hating other women and the jealousy that can happen in those situations. So, and the way it was talked about was all normalized. Like, this is just a thing that happens, and nobody got in trouble for it.
Right.
So it was
Right.
super uncomfortable to be in that conversation. We had quite a good conversation about that too. And then look at this book,
Right.
and learn how entwined that power and sex is with masculinity, with the church and with the Bible, and how I was not raised to think that way. And those sermons aren't often preached at the church I go to, but we talk about them because it's about looking at it through an honest lens. Like, this was written and this happened, and we should not deny that story. But then it talks about being trapped in a system. Like, this was in the book, in Shannon's book, about being trapped in this system. And it's a system that is also destroying them. Like, it's a cyclical behavior where a lot of men don't want to think that way or feel that way, but they think they have to in order to be a man. It's very jarring.
It's very, that's when I think that when I got to this page on 18, my reading focus, or it's like, oh, what I am reading sharpened, I would say.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just, I'm reading a book and almost like what I was, oh, we're going to get some wisdom from a transgendered man about masculinity from this unique perspective. But it really shaped, because part of that unique perspective is as white and as evangelical. I don't think that you can separate those out. And it especially felt so relevant and necessary in the time that we are living, in. And what we're witnessing, even what you mentioned earlier about, women's rights being rolled back and being challenged. And he talks about this passage of what I appreciated, because I've had conversations with white male friends, older gentlemen in particular, who during Trump's first term explains, like, okay, here's why Trump. And he said, because we need to get the good, people,
good old days.
Exactly, the good old days. And basically it was that Black and brown people were, it's not that Black and brown people, the multitude of them is the problem, but it's that with Obama being in president, that we're getting out of our place.
Yeah.
That's what was challenged, that the rightful order of things was challenged. And this passage on 182, where he said, so many white men in particular seem to believe if we could just get back there, then everything will be okay. In their minds, this past is some idyllic lands where rules were clear, people knew their place, and everything made sense. They ignore the fact that back there means women as objects with no autonomy or protections. Back there means slavery and Jim Crow laws and segregation. Back there means dangerous jobs with no regulation. It's clinging to a perfect past that was never actually perfect. But what it gave white men was a sense of superiority and power. And if we're being honest, that's what many of these men are trying to return to, a time when they were at the top. The sense of losing control, of losing power, of losing clarity is why so many men are floundering. What's underneath all the evangelical teachings about masculinity is a set of beliefs about power.
It's so well said.
It's just like, I can just copy this.
Yes.
And can't it, like, yes, it's exactly, I think for the gift of this very clear language from someone who is in the camp and inside the camp in such a unique way.
Yeah.
Is that it confirms, it gives language and confirmation to something that Black people have been feeling and sensing for a while now, as far as what that is. And I especially appreciated this sense of white men floundering. And I was like, so this book is very specific about, I think, the type of man that is being described here. And I think whereas probably there, a wide brush of men can relate to a lot of it, I don't know if the I call it the extreme unhealthy ways of how power is so having to rule is something that Black men, I think, would relate to. You know what I'm saying? Not that men, that there isn't patriarchy, because there is patriarchy, but there is like a different level of operation. And of course it would be because Black men never had the level of power, right? That
they've been oppressed by white men.
So whereas they have more power over, in women to some degrees, I think I have this saying, Amy, that I think that one of the surprise consequences of slavery was the liberation of Black women. I think that Black women are one of the most liberated groups of women on the planet. And that was by a lot of terrible stuff happening, right? And so the power dynamic between Black men and Black women looks very differently. And it's not that there isn't that play, but it's very different, in relationship to like what I'm reading here. There's parts where I'm like, I actually don't relate to that. Like, I don't experience that. I'm not seeing that, in my father, in my uncles, in my cousins, in my husband. That seems to be very normal and commonplace, here. And when I checked in with some of my, white friends, they were like, yeah, none of it was surprising. It was kind of like, I
see it a lot. And what I thought about too, I think Shannon does a good job in being specific that it is white masculinity. And he does speak in a lot of places about the oppression of trans people, queer, Black, brown people, and how they experience it differently. So I think he does a good job of that. But I do, in those moments, as I was reading it, I stopped to think about, obviously, I'm white, and my experience with men, and that when there has been violence toward me or objectification toward me, or I have felt fearful, it is always around white men. I've never felt that way with Black or brown men. I actually always feel much more at ease in those spaces, because I don't, and maybe it's because they have also been oppressed and have had violence. You have, so there is that sense where I'm like, white guys are the ones who have done me harm. So when I think of masculinity and toxic masculinity, I see a white man. I don't see men in a spectrum of color.
Wow.
I do see white men. And I sat and thought about that, because that you can't say that and then not also look at the historical figures and the facts of how Black men are portrayed, and
Right.
how often that they're blamed for violence.
Right.
When you look at the prison system, and how, there are more Black people in prison than white people. So
Right.
it's it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense.
Wow. But it makes sense. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, but it makes sense.
And it
Yeah,
was
well,
hard to read.
that's so interesting. And and also, so like the same exact thing that you said, I heard almost verbatim from another white female friend who said the same thing, which
Yeah.
is just a couple of days ago, which is fascinating to me. And I was saying to her, we were out, and I was saying, and there was this black guy, and there struck up a conversation, and I was sharing that when I'm out, I always draw, I appreciate it, I don't take it for granted, but it is something that happens just like so normal, that if I'm out, especially by myself or with some other females, and I'm around a black man, older, same age, younger, there's this look, or it could be a saying, just like, "Are you all right? You good? You good, sis? You all right?" Like, there's such care,
Yeah. Camaraderie.
that camaraderie, and just like checking in, like, are you, are you okay? If they have something, it's like, I'm an offer, like, and I expect it, like, that's my expectation.
There's
uh
humanity in it, of
yeah,
seeing human to human.
yeah, and it's just and I think, instead of like something that you can dominate, or what they said, like, that's just yours to do with what you want,
Mhm.
it's more of a responsibility towards, like a care, there's a responsibility towards that I feel. And so I haven't, yeah, I don't relate to, I've never been afraid, like that, and I haven't had violence towards me, thankfully, in that way, but I also just, I haven't, been like that. It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating and scary, because
It's
part of
disturbing.
the return and resurgence is more of this thinking, and it's almost being like validated on
Yes.
bigger stages and in bigger ways.
Yeah. Well, having a misogynist, white supremacist in the highest office in country is going to
Yeah.
embolden other people to be that way.
Yeah.
And the in the book, it talks about, in one of the chapters, it's collaboration versus competition.
Yes.
And I think that was one of my favorite chapters, because I'm a collaborator. I love collaborating with
Yes.
people. It's one of
Yes,
my
you are.
favorite things. Yes, you know this about me.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and the idea that competition, that men, and I don't know if it's solely white men when it comes to competition. I don't know if black men, black and brown men, feel the need to compete as well. But Shannon talked about, it's a no sum competition,
Yeah.
meaning you have a winner and a loser, but there needs, and that idea of competition instead of collaboration means that there's always going to be someone at the top and someone at the bottom.
Right.
And
Right.
the need to stop looking at it as a competition, but a collaboration where there is more harmony, which sounds like a utopia, really, and sometimes unrealistic. But I love the idea of, I personally work really hard to not compete with people. I compete within myself
Mhm.
to be better. And I know other people do this too. But that makes it easier then to collaborate with someone and lift someone up and be able to see, hey, I
Right.
see you. What you just said was genius, or what you just did, good on you. But that took work, because I think women are also raised to be competitive and to compete against other women,
Mhm.
to isolate us from other women so that we don't talk to each other. And we're just focused on the man all the time
Right.
and
Right.
winning the affection. Like, there's only one man for all these women to get. Like,
All the women.
right. I've just, and
And you bring up such a great point. And I think that it's harmful. I'm just plugging in my computer here. Because I don't want it to die on us. It's harmful when we do that. Yeah. Okay, I'm good. We have the juice going. It's harmful when that happens, but there's such a I think it goes along kind of what you were talking about, how the lone wolfness of kind of what defines a man, how it's hard to for men to be vulnerable
yep,
emotionally, vulnerable. So even if they're like, I have my people, I have my male group, the level of vulnerability that's shared within that, I thought it was very interesting when it put that men actually have more expectations when it comes to emotionally sharing with the women in their life versus with the men in their life. And competition is part of that, because if you feel like you're in competition with someone, you can't be but so vulnerable.
right.
It makes you weak.
Yeah.
To
Constantly in
do
a
that.
state of being prepared to fight.
Right. It's not a smart move. And perhaps historically, that was necessary, for some things. But I think like now and how we're evolving, um, it is something that I just, as far as like the evolution of, and I do see an evolution. So I'm not trying to, say that there isn't.
Ebbs
Like
and
I do
flows,
see
though.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that um it's helpful, this whole concept that one of the things I know that's going to stick with me is that masculinity isn't formed in isolation.
Right.
It's formed in community. And so we can say the same thing about, the opposite of that, right? And with as far as concerning women, and in the forming and the shaping of masculinity is women's role in that, you
Right.
know. And how do we egg on, promote, or keep alive the things like competition? Like, what's our role in that?
Yeah.
What's our role in even how we view or deal with, male emotions and our expectations or thresholds? Like, what are we kind of doing?
Right. It's not
So
just
yeah,
men who are upholding this idea of masculinity. A lot of women buy into, like, that's what a man is. That's
that's
what
what a
they're
man
attracted
is.
to. Yes, and you don't want a man who
Yeah,
you want a man who's tough, right?
yeah,
And who's going to show up and not talk about his feelings, but get things done. But in
yeah.
reality, that's not what you want. Long
Mhm.
term, that's not a helpful partner to have.
Mhm.
But that is the ideal that
Some
has
of what
been.
you want. It's some of what you want, right? Like,
Yeah,
so I think that there is that aspect of, yes, I do want someone who can show up, who is strong, who can get stuff done. But I think that the layers that we are allowed to have more as a woman, like that's just more culturally accepted or accepted from a societal perspective, the layers that are there to us, it's like allowing more layers to what we, to what we define as a man. So what does it look
yeah,
like to be strong and weak, right? And to appreciate, both of that, and like not weak as a bad thing, like, here weak as a
right. Is it
negative,
actually
you know
weakness?
Is it actually weakness? Like how to
Being
challenge,
vulnerable.
vulnerable, right? Like that's a much better word. And so I and how do we, like, what do we, like you said, as we were talking about, as women, how do we contribute towards that, and keep kind of that thing going, where, like, how much space do men have to explore it? You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I
Like,
want to be careful with that because it is still men's responsibility.
yes,
So they still do
yeah,
have the power and they're making a choice, but they're also competing for women, right? But there is one of the things that Shannon does really well, I think the repetition is that at this stage, the onus is on men to do the work,
men.
right?
Hmm.
Women have been blamed since the dawn of time,
Yes,
since Eve ate the apple, right? And it was all her fault, apparently, even though Adam was right there and he ate the apple too, but it's all Eve's fault, right? So
yeah,
the what Shannon does really well, I think, is reminding people that we've been women have been blamed a long time, and I think the perception is that women have a range of emotion, but there's also a lot of negative connotations to like that women are
hmm,
nagging, women are neurotic, women you can't cry at work or you're a bitch, or so having emotion,
fragile.
we're not really allowed to have it.
Yeah,
We just have it
right.
anyway because we feel, some of us feel
Hmm.
that we have a right to that, to be mad, but I don't, it hasn't always been that way. Women weren't allowed to feel. They were only in, like, you couldn't feel in public, right? You had to uphold whatever standard your husband chose, like back in like the 30s, 40s, 50s. So I think in a weird way, women are still waging war to be able to have healthy emotions and not be deemed, labeled as neurotic or
Yeah.
emotional. She's just being emotional, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
fascinating, because I would say that, and I do want to, we do have a comment that came in the chat that I do want to, by Emmett. Thanks, Emmett, who I think was talking about when we were talking about, Amy, um,
oh, the prison
last minute.
system
Yeah, the prison system, said the prison system, which is systemic and corrupt and so horrible,
and white owned. Prisons
and
are owned by
white
white people.
and very intentional.
Mhm.
It's extremely intentional. And it is an example of one of many systems that are in place to keep the status quo, to keep things, to keep people, right, in the
Keep the
proper
competition
place,
going so that
and to keep
men,
it right.
white men, can be on top.
And when we say competition, I really think that what we're talking about is, not really wanting to be compete, knowing that I won't win. I don't actually want to compete. So I keep my opponent at historic disadvantages, you
Right.
know? And so I think that that is
That's a good perspective.
important. If they are in chains, if they are, in prisons, if they are in poor, poor
You're
housing,
neutralizing your opponent.
you're neutralizing, you're actually not competing. You
Yeah.
actually get no prize, no glory, no hurrah for me at all. You're not competing. But what you are doing is maintaining your position of power,
Mhm.
over people. And to just circle back to what you were saying about emotions of women, and just I wanted to share with you, like, my response when you were
Yeah.
speaking was like, wow, as a black woman, I'm like, white women have a lot more freedom to express all of your emotions. Like, from my perspective as a black woman, not having to be, especially in certain situations, um having to be restrained, you
Yeah.
know, having to be restrained, having to practice that. So consistently. So, um, because of the attack of what happens, what you're called as a Black woman, you're the definition of an angry Black woman. So as you were speaking, I was really like, whoa, I would not have it was interesting that you, which I appreciate, was like that there's a lack of range of emotions that women can actually express, that is kind of controlled. And I can definitely see that in certain times, but I feel like now especially there is a lot of freedom, or a lot more freedom, I would say, that white women have in being able to express their emotions than Black and brown women have been able, to do. So yeah, I think that we might have lost Amy a little bit. Hopefully we can get her to come back. We'll see. But this is such a and we're almost at time anyways. This is such a great read. Um No One Taught Me How to Be a Man by Shannon Kearns. If you have not heard about this book, or if you haven't read it, definitely it's something that I would encourage to get a copy of and read this book. I think that this book, hopefully, our conversation tonight has demonstrated that although his intended audience was for men, that this is a book that really is great for all, people to read and to wrestle with. To read, I would say, and to wrestle with. I think Amy shared at the beginning of our time together that she's going to go back and sit with it again and read it again. And I definitely will too. And it's great, you guys. This is a great book to read in community. As you know, I'm all about that, to read in community, because there is so much to discuss, and unpack, and to sit with. And so for that, I'm just highly appreciative of Shannon, committed to doing this work so that we have this to hold in our hands and to sit with and to think about. So yes, this has been, I'm sorry that we didn't get to say a formal goodbye to Amy. She had some technical issues on her side, but I'm so happy that it came at the end of our time together. And one question that I like to ask and to sit with myself and ask my guest, and I'll have Amy maybe answer it, and then I'll drop it in the comments below her answer, to look at, is how a book helps us to be, or helps me to be more human in this moment that I find myself living in. And for sure, off the top, I think this was an easy answer for me to answer. And the fact that reading this book, because it was so outside of my lived experience, as I'm a woman, I'm a cisgendered woman, I'm a Black woman, I did not grow up in white evangelical spaces. So I was so removed from the main identity of this book that immediately I started to experience, as I was sharing at the beginning, my own biases. And I think that one of the gifts that this book has given me is really helping me to be mindful of my unconscious bias that I bring not only to books, but I bring to people and circumstances as I move about the world, because I have them and we all have them. And having an unconscious bias, that's human. But the actions that we take, that's our choice, right? That's where our agency sits. And that's what this book has really helped me, to just be mindful of, that lesson of getting in there a little more deeply. And I am very appreciative of that. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this conversation. If you have, please, please, please like. That helps all the algorithms know what to do. And oh, is she like, do we have her? Oh yes, great, great, great. You're back. You're back.
I
You're
am
back. You're back.
so sorry and so embarrassed. My battery and my laptop just completely died. It won't even restart. So
Oh, you know what? Well, that's why you saw me like plugging in. I wanted to, before I was about to wrap up, but because I have you back, we have another question in the chat, and it
Yes.
was where like I wanted to kind of flow to towards the end. And Cherie asked, who's my sister, hi Cherie, that does the book offer any hope or solutions
Yes.
to this? And so that's a great place, I think, for us to land as we journey through this book. So I'll let you. Do you want to go first with that?
Sure, I can. I think there's a chapter at the end that really talks more about not simple steps, but clear steps that men can take to try and come to terms with a lot of white men can take to come to terms with some of the urges for violence or this ingrained learnings. So there is unlearning that needs to be done. And it talks about the importance of awareness and doing things like journaling as well as meditation. But one of the important chapters that I found was about male relationships, men having relationships with other men, and finding men who also want to change and be better men or redefine what a man is, and the importance of speaking up when you are in spaces where there are derogatory phrases, terms toward anyone, whether it's women or other communities, um, speaking up and noting, challenging the status quo, saying it's not okay because men do have less to fear in those spaces than like if I were to speak up in those spaces, right? So, I found that that was an important piece. And I've always said one of the books that led me to this book was We Should All Be Feminists. So,
Yeah.
and it was just kind of coming back to that idea that men can be feminists, but
Mm-hmm.
also other things too. But I feel like it starts with that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really appreciated Cherie, to answer your question. I appreciated how thoughtful Shannon ended this book with the suggestions on what practical steps, very tangible steps that men can take to deprogram, unlearn things that have just been ingrained in them for a long time, right? It's in the environment, it's in the very air that they are swimming in. And in addition to the things that Amy mentioned, was also therapy, and also for men living in community and households with other people, so not living by themselves, actually making to-do lists. It says
Yeah.
to-do list to make sure you're contributing to the household. I really liked that, and like using a list. Men are really good with lists. That works. And it helps you stay on track and really thinking about not the list that's all the things that are already on the list, like the man's list, but the other things, like if it's grocery shopping or whatever those things are, and whatever how situation that is in. But I really appreciated that very tangible thing. And then the other thing that I really appreciated as far as the suggestion was practicing being wrong.
Yes, that's right.
Practicing being wrong, you know? And because when you are in a dominant position, and you have that privilege and you move through life with that entitlement, you you may not be practicing that as much, and so something can feel someone who disagrees or has another way could feel like that can feel like you have to be defensive or defiant or challenged. And so just practicing being wrong, look for those opportunities, welcome them, be in situation. And sometimes that means like, hey, let's have a challenging conversation. Let's not
Be
talk about just
uncomfortable.
what I know we agree on, right? Get uncomfortable, which is a very important, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a small book, you guys. You can literally read it in a setting. I did read it like, in a setting. And it moves very fast. So, but it's small and mighty. There's a lot here that
Yes.
is packed in. And again, as I was saying, Amy, when you were away, I really think that this book, I think we have proven, that's what I was saying, that even though this book was written for men, that this is something that everyone can benefit reading and gleaning from, especially during these times that we're in.
Yes.
And anything that I can pull towards myself that gives me a little bit more insight, which helps in some strategy and the ways in which I move about in these times, I consider that valuable. So, this is a very kind of valuable addition to my arsenal of knowledge that I have. So thanks again for sharing it with me and sharing it with everyone out there.
Yes.
For all of those
Same.
live, thanks Substack family for hanging out with me this evening. And yeah, and until next time, I see you again. I hope as always that you all stay safe and that you stay reading. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Like my laptop was plugged in.
Mine too, but you know what? When I moved around,